Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome inside the Fan Cave. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. You know the drill. Call us anytime and air your opinions at 412-575-2600. Also on Twitter at KDPomp, at Chris Mueller, PGH. Chris is up at 93.7 The Fan. PM team in action today. And, Chris, the Penguins were in action also. And they kind of laid an egg once again. Big second period by the Florida Panthers. Won their 9th game in a row on the road. And they beat the Penguins. And the question is, that clock keeps ticking as you get closer to the deadline. With each loss that goes by, the likelihood of a Jake Guentzel trade, I think, grows. And tonight, Guentzel, of all things, got roughed up a little bit by Nico Mikkola. And the last thing they want is for him to get injured before this ever happens.
Yeah, every passing loss absolutely increases the chances that Jake Guentzel is going to get dealt. And the team played tonight like they want Jake Guentzel to get dealt, even though we know that that is not the case. It was a pretty pathetic effort, I thought. They had that first goal disallowed, seemed to take any wind out of the sails. I thought maybe they found something in the power play, coming right out of the break. They had a couple power play goals not that long ago. That feels like a long time ago. The power play just sucks the life out of everything that's happening with that team. They are a mess, and I don't want to hear about games in hand anymore. I mean, this team just has come out completely flat. You know, they go 0 for that road trip into the north central part of North America, and they come back and just get flattened by a Florida team. I don't know about you, Bob. I tweeted this, and this might have been just a snap judgment, maybe not that accurate, but Florida is now the more skilled, younger, faster team. You would see games like this where the Penguins of 10 years ago or 12 years ago or whatever would play these games against lesser competition. They'd maybe get a lucky break early where they wouldn't have, the other team wouldn't get a goal scored or have a goal disallowed. And then the Penguins would just flatten them out of nowhere and cruise to an easy victory. And now the shoe is very much on the other foot, or the skate is on the other foot, and they are very much the team that cannot really afford to play anything other than a great game against good competition, because otherwise it'll be what happened tonight. They'll get absolutely rolled.
Yeah, 0 for 4 in the power play after it looked like Raquel had scored one. It was disallowed after a challenge. Good one by Paul Maurice, who's a very good coach, I think, with the Panthers. You know what they did, though? They made a really good hockey trade, and a hockey trade a few years ago when they traded Jonathan Huberdeau for Matthew Tkachuk. This guy is unbelievable. The entire bloodlines of the Tkachuk family. He knows how to play. He can get rough and tumble. He knows how to assist. He had a breakaway tonight, which was so wide open. He got his own rebound and then drew a penalty by Chris Letang, Chris. So that was a good hockey trade. And I've also noticed how well Evan Rodriguez is doing down there. He had a couple of helpers tonight as well.
If the implication is that you're leading me towards is that the Penguins can make a hockey trade with Jake Guentzel and get something positive out of it, the fact that the team acquiring him would be risking him as only a rental, I think, negates or undercuts the ability for it to be a pure hockey deal. But they could get somebody back or a package of players back that helps them a little bit in the short term and a little bit more in the longer term. But you watched this team as much as I did, Bob, in this game, despite probably not wanting to after a certain point in time. It just seems that their problems are myriad and not necessarily easily fixable. And I'm not even sure that like Malkin and Letang, for example, are really problems. Ryan Graves, just some of these contracts for players who are supposed to be really high-end complimentary guys just look really bad right now. Kyle Dubas really has a lot of work to do, both in the short and long term with this team.
Yeah, Jeff Hathor and I were sitting at the game tonight. He made an interesting point because we remember when all these contracts were being signed, the one that everyone was up in arms about was Tristan Jarry, and now it looks like that's the best contract they offered in this offseason. Everyone else doesn't seem to be working so well, and they got issues, no doubt. We'll talk about that and more. The Pirates open up today. The Steelers are in the offseason. What will happen there? A lot of speculation as mock draft season has started. We'll get into it all with you. It's 412-575-2600, so call, join the program. You're watching it live on KDKA Plus and simulcast on 93.7 The Fan, and Chris and I return right after this. Our GMC Sierra tweet of the night comes from the retired and veteran columnist of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Press, Bob Smizik. He says reports coming out of Pirates spring training suggest Henry Davis might start the season at Indy. If true, that's incomprehensible. The Pirates' handling of Davis' development as a catcher has been abysmal. Seriously, does anyone in that organization know what they're doing? That's interesting because they drafted him to be a catcher, and I will still say that back when it happened, Chris. People will say, well, they just wanted his bat. Listen, you needed a catcher at that point. He was available. Your idea was to make him a catcher and get offense out of position that many teams do not have. So, does this mean it won't happen? I don't know. All I know is that if he does it, I imagine it's because they need some fine-tuning behind home plate, which is why they brought in Grandal. What do you make of all of this?
So I'll address what Bob tweeted there here to start. If they drafted him with reservations that he could be a catcher full-time in the major leagues, and I do think that's what happened. I remember when he was picked, there were whispers that scouts thought, people around the industry thought he would be a stretch to remain at catcher. If you're going to take a guy like that, the bat that he brings to the table, the offense, better be transcendent. Mike Piazza level offense. I'm serious though. Mike Piazza level offense, or else
yes.
He should be a guy who offensively can play like an MVP. And if he sticks at catcher, then guess what? He is going to be an MVP if the bat is that good, if the offense is that good. If he doesn't and he has to move to like first base or an outfield spot, you still have a very, very useful offensive player. I don't think Davis is close to that guy offensively. And like I said, I'll reiterate, I think they had an inkling he might not be able to stick, or even it would be likely he wouldn't stick at catcher when they picked him. Certainly early in his career, the way they handled him and handled the position and handled a guy like Endy Rodriguez, and now with Grandal being here, they've sort of telegraphed what they think. Pony said today on the air, he kind of just wants to see Henry Davis go out there, play catcher at the major league level, and if it happens, just have him fail miserably, just so he sees that Davis can't play. But I'll tell you this, Bob, my opinion is they already know he can't do it. And the idea that they've signed Grandal and that they're going to have him probably be their primary catcher tells me, or that they're not going to have Henry Davis be their primary catcher at the very least, tells me they already know what they've got. That makes it a failed draft pick. And Bob can say, hey, does anyone in the organization know what they're doing? If he means from an instruction perspective, I can get that, but I think it's a scouting perspective here. What are you doing picking the guy if you don't think he can stick at that position?
I agree. They brought in Endy Rodriguez. They had hopes for him. He got injured. And so instead of just saying, okay, this is you, Henry Davis, we're going to go, they're not doing that at all. In fact, they brought back Jason DeLay. They still have him. They have others. I find it very, very head-scratching knowing that they have some other guys in the outfield who may be better than he is defensively at outfield, but they're going to have to figure out a place to get his bat. Anyway, we have a lot of Penguin talk. I want to do two tweets before we go to the phone line. Sean Kramer says the Penguins just look flat, his Sullivan's voice not being heard, and Kim Dunn said the Penguin game felt like the Cleveland game before Canada was fired. The voice being heard thing, you hear that a lot. I can't imagine. I think more than anything else, Sullivan's voice, I still think, is being heard by a lot. I just don't think they're capable of doing what he wants to do, which then requires you to change the way you do business. And that would specifically, to me, apply to Evgeny Malkin. He can't do what he says he's trying to adapt and do different things, but I don't see it. I see no production. I see a guy who's showing signs of age, quite frankly, and this is what you got. So what do you do? How do you counteract all of this if you're the head coach? You really don't have much in your minors, Chris. What do you do?
Well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks when it comes to a guy like Malkin. Jari, after the game, said we need to play a simpler game, just need to do the simple, basic things, hockey 101 type things. But when you've had as much talent for as long as the Penguins have had it, you're used to playing more graduate-level hockey because you're able to, because that talent affords you the opportunity to play a certain style. And I think it would be very tough for any coach right now, Sullivan or otherwise, to convince an aging group of players that isn't capable, as you said, of what they used to be, to start playing a completely different way. I understand it when people say, is his voice not being heard? But I do think that's an easier reality to try to wrap your head around than to confront the one that's really in front of them. And you alluded to this already. They just aren't good enough to do a lot of what he wants to do. They're not the team they used to be. On their best day, they look like a team that can hang with the best in the NHL. On their best day 7 or 8 years ago, they were the best in the NHL. It's father time, and Pomp, unfortunately, he remains undefeated, as he's proving with these Penguins.
And I'll say another one, all due respect to his talent and what he's done, but Erik Karlsson is not what I expected him to be. Yeah, they cleared some salary and dumped some contracts, but bottom line there is he's not. Maybe that's why he was a limited market. Not many teams seem to be interested. We got a lot of calls here. Let's get to them here, Chris. We got Paul in Natrona Heights. All Penguin calls tonight. What's up, Paul? How are you?
Hi, Bob. Hi, Chris. The Pirate thing, that upsets me the most as a partial season ticket holder, and Gradal's a terrible signing. But that's what I called about. I think it's time to dump these stars, these lazy stars, and do the Branch Rickey thing. We're losing with you. We can lose without you.
Yeah, but they're still selling tickets, and that's a big component of this. They were brought back for a lot of reasons. Don't underestimate the importance of that for a team that needs that revenue. But I understand what you're saying. And Crosby's having a really good season. That's the sad part about all this, Chris. He's been healthy for every game, knock on wood. So has Malkin, Letang. They've all been in there. And yet this group continues to lose the same way, which is to say they're actually pretty good defensively, 5-on-5. Their goaltending's been better than people thought, and yet they can't score goals.
The power play is abysmal. I mean, Graves has been really bad as a big-time signing. Raquel hasn't been as good. Certainly, he's been way worse, actually, than I think people thought he would be. I just saw somebody tweeting about it, and you can look at some of the contracts they elected to do this offseason. And I know Malkin's really frustrating, and Letang to a lesser extent kind of irks people at times. But those guys don't look like such bad deals, quite honestly, when you compare them with some of the ones on the fringes. Kyle Dubas just did not plug in the right pieces to get the most out of this roster's core.
No question about it. Now he's going to be faced with what to do at the deadline. And I don't know what else you can do in terms of who you have to offer to other teams. Would someone be willing to take one of these guys they just signed if they find, I don't know what you can get. I think they're kind of stuck right now in what they have, and they may just have to keep what they have and see what happens at the end of the season, and that includes Gensel. They may not get an offer that's right, and they're going to have to either sign him, and I hate to say, just let him walk, clear salary. I don't know what else to do in that situation. What would you want, Chris, in return for a Jake Gensel at this point, knowing he's at the end of a contract, which means he's a rental player and thus hurts his leverage and their leverage?
I mean, you still try for a first-round pick and a somewhat useful player. That's like where most people end up. But you're right. I mean, him being a potential rental is a huge factor here. If you send him to a team, or if you work out a deal with a team where you do think it's very likely that they're going to sign the guy long term, they might be willing to give up more because they want to commit to him. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I would be tempted to just try to see this through one more time, keep Gensel if the right offer doesn't materialize. In fact, I've said this and people don't agree with me, but you have to be willing to just bite the bullet and say, if he walks, he walks. We try to win one more time this year, as bleak as it looks. I mean, Bob, do you think it's going to suddenly look better for them a year later? Probably not.
No.
So as grim as it is right now, them just finally snapping out of it and getting on a run might be their best chance. And in that case, if the Gensel offer doesn't materialize that you like, then you keep him at the risk of losing him for nothing and just say, hey, eventually in hockey, when you've been this good for this long in a salary cap sport, the bill comes due. Because that's what apparently is happening for the Penguins right now, and it's about as ugly and frustrating as most people anticipated it would be.
Yeah, and it's very much similar, perhaps, as it's moving forward to what the team they're going to see tomorrow, the Chicago Blackhawks, even with Connor Bedard, who's still out, although he's getting closer to a return. Let's squeeze in Tom in Crafton. Tom, you're up. What's going on?
Hey, Bob. Hi, Chris. I just wanted to say, from the opening comments, Chris, your comments you pretty much hit the proverbial nail on the head with a lot of your comments. Just watching the team, they can't compete with the Floridas and the Carolinas and the Bruins and look at the other teams that have retooled and rebuilt. Vancouver, a couple of years back, they were 2 or 3 years, they were just maybe a mediocre hockey club. And even the Flyers, Bob, I think you've mentioned that a few times, how the Flyers have come on here with a little bit of their rebuilding program. But it's too bad. It's frustrating, especially since Crosby still plays at a high level, but it looks like if he's going to win another cup, it's not going to be here, sorry to say.
Yeah, the Flyers are interesting because Tortorella's done a very good job with that team. They made a big trade with the team that was just here when they got Claude Giroux, who's no longer there in Florida, but they got a number 1 pick. They got Owen Tippett, who's a real good player, and I think they locked him up for like $49 million. I don't know if they can get anybody like that, a current player. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is Philadelphia in a rebuild is 11 points ahead of the Penguins at this point, Chris. I didn't expect that because I thought they were going to go through some really tough times before they got better.
Torts is doing a marvelous job out there. He really is. He's doing a terrific piece of coaching with them. We had Tyler Kennedy on today. He said he put the Penguins, now before this game, obviously, at being a 60% likelihood in his mind to make the playoffs. Ooh. I asked him why he was so confident. He said, I think Philly's coming back to earth. With every passing game where they don't and the Penguins don't start scaling that mountain, this just becomes potentially uglier and uglier down the stretch. In fact, I shudder, Bob, to think if this team starts to look really out of it post-trade deadline and they really sink, I shudder to think about what that building is going to look like attendance-wise if they are playing functionally meaningless games in the latter portion of the season.
Interesting point. Zach Williams on Twitter says, I see nothing different from Kyle Dubas than I did from Ron Hextall. Dagger right there. We'll take a break, come back with more. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. It's live on KDKA Plus and 93.7 The Fan. Chris, Matt in Butler. Hey, Matt, make it quick, please.
Hey, guys. Hey, Erik Karlsson is a bust. He was supposed to do our biggest trade thing, and he is a bust.
Yeah, he's not been good. And, just doesn't seem to help the power play, and generally speaking, not all that good. I got a tweet here, and I'll get your response to it, Chris. I put out the trading of Jake Guentzel gets more likely with every goal scored. That was an hour ago, and this guy writes, Roger, he says, so what you're saying is Jory was an open door tonight, but it's Jake's fault. Are you high? No, I'm not high, and that's not what I said. I said the chances of him being here decrease with every loss that goes by, essentially. So that's it. And Jari wasn't good tonight, but it wasn't his fault on 3 of the goals that I saw in the second period.
If your takeaway from the night is Jari was bad, your ability to analyze hockey is limited to goalie bad, goalie good. Come on, get real. They got way more problems than Tristan Jari.
Yeah. Good night. We're done, Chris. We'll see you again tomorrow night, and we'll see you back here at 10:35.